one scone, one piano, one sentence in a sunroom in Scotland with 6 words on the end of it that had nothing to do with a child. 3 small refusals, all pointed at the same 11-year-old girl. Inside 4 months. Queen Camilla said all 3 of them to Princess Charlotte. She said them quietly, in rooms full of people, in that pleasant voice that makes a correction sound like a kindness. And every time there were adults close enough to hear it, and nobody said a word back to her. By the end of the summer, a woman who has spent 20 years making sure she is never left out of a photograph was sitting at the far end of a table in Scotland, 3 chairs from those children, and there was a guest list that summer with her name missing off it. The sentence in the sunroom is the one that finished it. 6 words on the end of it turned it from an old woman correcting a child into something else entirely, and Charlotte has never repeated them to anybody. I am holding them back until we get to Balmoral, because handed to you now they are a small remark from a grandmother, and you will not understand why a father walked out of that room and started cancelling things. If you want the whole of it, the scone, the piano, the guest list, and the 6 words, subscribe and put the bell on now. Because the last quarter is where William stops being polite. I have had this one in front of me for 3 weeks, and the reason it took 3 weeks is that I kept trying to make it smaller than it is. I'm Harold. Taken one at a time, each of these looks like nothing much, and that is the trick of it. So I stopped looking at them one at a time and started counting them. By the end of this, you will have the question William put to his stepmother in that sunroom at Balmoral, in front of a witness that she has never answered out loud. Not that day, not since. 4 gatherings, that is all this takes. 4 times this family got into the same building between the spring and the end of the summer, and the pattern only shows up when you put them next to each other. The first one was a lunch at Windsor. Nothing about that afternoon was unusual on paper. A private lunch inside the castle, arranged around one of the Queen's charitable patronages. And let me give you that word now because nobody says what it means. A patronage is a charity with a senior royal attached to its name. The royal turns up, opens things, and the charity gets front pages it could never buy. Camilla has built 20 years of public credit out of hers, and the rest of this makes no sense if you think she is a cartoon. Several generations under one roof. Camilla's people, the Wales children, a few extended relatives who do not always mix well, and lunch in the main hall. Catherine went into that lunch uneasy, and could not have told you why. Charlotte had been quiet all morning, gone somewhere behind her own face, trying to take up less room than usual. Any parent knows the difference between a child who is cross and a child who has decided to be small. The children went into one of the side salons for their tea. Behave, make polite conversation, eat your sandwiches, while the adults do the important business of standing about in another room. Catherine put Charlotte in her seat, kissed her forehead, and went back to the grown-ups. 45 minutes later, she was mid-conversation with a senior courtier when Charlotte went past one of the open doors across the corridor. The girl was not crying. Her face had gone white, and her mouth was pressed into a line, and she was walking the way children walk when they are trying to get somewhere before their face goes. Catherine stopped mid-sentence, which she does not do, and followed her. She found her at the far end of the hallway near one of the service doors, on her own, hands clasped, looking at the floor. Catherine asked her what had happened. "Nothing, Mummy." She crouched down to her eye level and asked again, "Sweetheart, I know when something is wrong." And it came out quietly, the way these things always come out. Granny Camilla said I was showing off. She told me not to speak unless I was spoken to. Catherine asked her when. It was when I told Louis the answer to a question. We were playing a guessing game, and she got annoyed. Think about the size of the crime. The 8-year-old is stuck in a guessing game, and his sister tells him the answer, because that is what a sister does. Catherine did not say anything for a moment. She pulled her daughter in and held on to her, calm on the outside. And something moved permanently on the inside. Somebody left a comment under the last video that belongs here. They wrote that when they watch Charlotte at public events, they see a little girl doing a job. That is the most accurate line anybody has sent me all year, and it explains the corridor. A child raised to do a job does not tell you when the job hurts. She finds a service door and comes back with her face fixed. If her mother had been 30 seconds later, nobody would ever have known. She had kept the peace with Camilla for 15 years. Not warmth, a working arrangement, the sort you build with somebody you will be photographed beside for the rest of your life. Camilla has firm views about hierarchy and about how young women ought to conduct themselves, and she keeps them behind a smile. Catherine had assumed, and this was the mistake, that none of it would ever be pointed at the children. The rest of that afternoon she watched. The families went out for the walk through the gardens, the part that ends up in the papers, and Camilla was up ahead beside Charles, talking away as though the morning had been ordinary. Catherine sat with Charlotte and watched her back. The remark on its own she could have put down to a woman of 79 having a bad hour. The part that would not leave her alone was that Charlotte had gone off down a corridor by herself to have her feelings where nobody could see them. 11 years old, and her first instinct was to hide it. After the gardens, everybody came back inside for the refreshments, and Catherine kept a quiet eye on the room. Charlotte reached for a second scone. Camilla turned, looked down at her hand, and said it with a half-smile. "Perhaps one is enough, darling. We do not want to appear greedy." There it is again, in front of the table, to a child of 11 who does not have an ounce on her. That was the moment Catherine stopped calling it a bad hour. One remark is a mood. The same remark at the same child, twice in an afternoon, is a habit, and habits have been going on longer than the day you notice them. She did not react. Her silences have always been on purpose. She was collecting. William knew nothing about any of it. He had been shut in with his father and 2 aides all afternoon going through the autumn diary, which is why he walked into the sitting room that evening with no idea what he was walking into. Tea got cleared, and the adults moved into one of the sitting rooms off the main gallery, an old habit carried over from the late Queen's time. The children come in for a while before the nannies take them up. Charlotte came in with George and Louis and sat by the fireplace with a book she had pulled off the shelf. Her face was carefully neutral, which at 11 takes effort. Camilla came in a few minutes later with a glass of water, laughing with one of her longest-serving aides, in a good mood by the look of her. She gave the children a brief smile and turned to the adults. The boys drifted over to their grandfather. Charlotte stayed where she was. And then Charlotte asked her a question, politely, the way she has been trained to since she could talk. "May I play the piano for a bit?" Camilla looked over her shoulder. The piano. Yes, quietly. Camilla took a sip out of her glass, and then she looked straight at her, and she said it. "Darling, that is not necessary. Let the grown-ups enjoy some peace. You can sit still like a proper young lady." Nobody shouted. From the other side of that room you would have heard a pleasant voice and a bit of laughter and thought nothing of it. Charlotte's cheeks went red. She closed the book, folded her hands, and sat like that. Sit still, like a proper young lady. To a girl who asked, politely, in a room with a piano in it, whether she could play it quietly. Of everything in this story, the piano is the one that got under my skin. There is film of Diana at a piano from the Australia tour in 1988, and it went round the world when it surfaced again a few years back. She sits down in front of a room of people in the middle of a working tour and plays Rachmaninoff. She had played since she was a girl. It was the one thing entirely hers, with nothing to do with the family she married into. Her granddaughter asked to play the piano quietly in a room at Windsor and was told to sit still like a proper young lady. Charlotte knows none of that. She never met her. She was told to sit down, so she sat down. Catherine heard all of it. She was a few feet away with Lady Lansdowne, and her eyes went to Charlotte, then to Camilla, and she held that look longer than she normally would. Camilla felt it. Their eyes met for about a second and a half, and Camilla looked away first. Everybody carried on. The nannies took the children up at the usual time, and the afternoon closed the way these afternoons always close, with a family world famous for not saying anything. That is the first gathering. Hold on to the piano. It comes back at the end of this, and it does not come back the way you think. They were back at Adelaide Cottage that evening, and the house had gone quiet. Catherine put Charlotte to bed herself. George was asleep down the hall. William was in the study finishing a call with his private secretary, and he still knew nothing. She sat on the edge of the bed and asked her daughter whether she had been upset that day. Charlotte was not sure what she was allowed to say. A little. "But I am okay. You do not have to pretend." Charlotte nodded and gave her mother the whole thing in 9 words. "Granny Camilla does not like when I talk too much. No drama, no exaggeration, no 11-year-old embroidery." She had worked out the rule and was reciting it back. And the rule she had learned that spring was that talking gets you told off. Catherine kissed her forehead, stood up, turned the lamp off and went down the hall. The study door was open. William looked up. "Is she all right?" "She is trying to be." He leaned back and asked what had happened, and Catherine told him. All of it in order, without heat. The guessing game, showing off, the corridor, the scone, the piano. Sit still like a proper young lady. And at the end of it, her daughter in bed, explaining her grandmother's rule in 9 words, as though it were a normal thing to learn. He did not interrupt her once. I have been told 2 versions of what he did when she finished, and they agree on the important part. He said nothing for a while. He sat there with his jaw set, and did not trust himself to open his mouth. You have to understand what that account sounds like inside that man's head, because it is the engine of everything that happens next. William was 13 when the Panorama interview went out, and the country spent a fortnight taking his mother's marriage apart at the breakfast table. He was 15 when she died. 6 days later, he walked behind her coffin down the mall with 1 million people watching, and the one thing the men running that institution would not let him do, then or in any of the years before it, was answer anybody back on her behalf. He has talked about that walk once, in the film he and his brother made for the 20th anniversary in 2017, and what he described was the noise, and not being allowed to show anything of his own. And the thing said about Diana over and over for 15 years by people in that building, in that same pleasant voice, was that she was oversensitive, too emotional, difficult, a woman who could not take a joke. They had a whole vocabulary for making a person's reaction the problem instead of the thing she reacted to, and William grew up inside it. Now a room of adults is watching his daughter go quiet and calling it manners. "I agree," he told Catherine, and then he said the thing that a lot of people would have been surprised to hear from him. "We handle it carefully. Careful is the part everybody misses about William. And it is why the version where he loses his temper and shouts the house down is wrong. He does something worse for the person on the receiving end, and the first move came the next morning before anybody had finished breakfast. There was an event in the diary that week, a charity garden project Camilla had put together with a mix of royal grandchildren attached to it. Nice pictures, good cause, a photograph in every paper in the country. William took Charlotte off it. The reason given was a minor cold. There was no cold. He was not sending his daughter back into that woman's company for a photo call 4 days after finding out what had been said to her, and he was not explaining himself to anybody about it. That decision looks small, written down. Inside that family it is not, because the whole arrangement runs on the pictures. A royal charity project with the Wales children in it is a different event from one without them, and everybody involved knows it. Taking Charlotte out 4 days beforehand with an excuse that thin is a message, and it went to one person. Word got to Camilla that Charlotte would not be coming. She did not say much about it. One of her aides mentioned it and she raised an eyebrow, and then she said something under her breath, probably too delicate for a little mud. Think about what has happened there. A child is pulled out of an event, and the first place that woman goes in front of staff is back to the same accusation, delicate, soft, cannot cope. The same word they used about the girl's grandmother for 15 years said out loud in a corridor by somebody who knows the aides will repeat it. That is how it got back to Catherine inside a day. 200 people work around that family. They see each other at Christmas, they marry each other, and no remark made in front of staff stays in the room. There are now two households, half a mile apart, both of which know exactly what has been said, and neither of which has put a word of it in writing. Before the second gathering, one thing, because a lot of you have already worked out where this is heading. The last video I put out was about a document. William and Catherine sat down with Charles at Windsor and put one rule on paper, that when a reign ends, the household around the previous king's widow ends with it, and a lot of you wrote afterwards asking where that comes from. This is where it comes from. A guessing game at a tea table, a second scone, and a piano nobody let an 11-year-old touch. Everything that ends up in a folder started in a room with a child in it. If you watched that one first, you have been watching the effect. This is the cause. Nobody has confirmed a word of what was said in any of these rooms. I can put in front of you what people did afterwards, and people are more honest with their diaries than with their mouths. Before we go into Highgrove, I owe Camilla 2 minutes, because a flat villain is a boring villain, and usually the wrong reading. Look at what that woman came up through. She arrived in that family as the most disliked person in Britain, and stayed there the best part of 20 years. She was booed. She had bread rolls thrown at her in a supermarket car park in Wiltshire in 1995, and she has never once mentioned it in public. She spent a decade being told that the way back was total self-control. Say nothing. Be pleasant, be useful, be early, and above all be correct, because a woman in her position gets one mistake and it follows her for 30 years. She learned that lesson better than anybody alive, and her whole recovery was built on it. 20 years of turning up on cold mornings in unglamorous places while the papers ran things about her that would have finished most people. Put her in a room with an 11-year-old who is talking, answering her brother's question, asking for a second scone, asking to play the piano. And she is not seeing a happy child. She is seeing a girl doing everything she taught herself never to do. In her head she is helping, handing that girl the survival kit nobody handed her, with the same weapon that was used on her. A polite sentence delivered in front of witnesses. That is the charitable reading, and it is at least half true. The other half is the second clause of a sentence in a sunroom in Scotland, and no amount of charity gets that one past you. One more thing sits under this. Camilla is 79. Her husband is 77, and Buckingham Palace told the country he had cancer in February 2024. She knows what is coming, and she knows that everything she has, the diary, the office, the standing, arrives from the man she is married to and from nowhere else. A woman who can feel the floor moving under her, gets firmer about the rules, not softer, and she goes to the children with it. The second gathering was at Highgrove, and it was Charles who arranged it. He wanted a quiet dinner. No aides, an evening as a family, some talk about the tours. He has been trying to get everybody around one table for years, and he still believes a good dinner fixes things, which after 77 years is remarkable. Catherine came into the main lounge with Charlotte, who had come down for 2 minutes to say goodnight to her grandfather before bed. She was in her dressing gown. She wasn't stopping. Camilla barely looked up from her seat by the fire. Charlotte walked over, smiled, and said, "Good evening, Granny." And Camilla did not smile back. She said, "Are you sure you are not too tired to be here?" Everybody in that room heard it. Charles heard it, and William heard it. An 11-year-old crosses a room in her dressing gown to be polite to her grandfather, and the first thing said to her is whether she should be there. That is the third time. Showing off, greedy, too tired to be here. 3 rooms, 1 child, all of it dressed up as concern. William stood up. He did not raise his voice. Everybody who has described that evening to me reaches for the same 2 words, quiet and fast. He turned to Charlotte and told her to say goodnight to her grandfather and go up with Anna in the ordinary voice you use with your own child, because whatever was about to happen was not happening in front of her. Charlotte looked at her father, uncertain. He gave her a small nod. She hugged Charles, and Charles held on a second longer than he needed to. And then she went out with the nanny, and the door clicked shut. And then nobody said anything. Camilla sat back with her wine, looked round the room at 4 adults saying nothing, and made the mistake. Well, she is very sensitive, isn't she? There it is. There is the word. She said it in a room containing Diana's son, about Diana's granddaughter, using the exact word used about his mother in that same tone by that same class of people from the day she arrived in that family until the day she died. I do not believe she did it on purpose, and it makes no difference because the man she said it to has been listening out for that word his whole life. Charles shifted in his chair. He knew. The temperature dropped, and the only person who had not noticed was the woman holding the glass. William did not shout. He said, "No, she is not too sensitive. She is a child, and she will be spoken to with kindness." Camilla raised an eyebrow. "I did not mean it that way. I was surprised she was still up. It is hardly a thing to get upset about." And William gave her the sentence that took the evening away from her. "It is not tonight. It has been happening for weeks, and I have heard what has been said to her, and so has she." The room got colder. Charles tried to get in front of it, the way he always does. "Darling, perhaps we should all sit down and—" William did not let him finish. He was still calm, and calm out of him at that moment is worse than shouting, because it means he has decided. If it were one comment, we would move on. It is a pattern, and I am not going to stand here while my daughter is made to feel less than. Camilla looked at Charles. That is the part I keep going back to. She looked at her husband and waited, and she has been able to do that for 20 years and have it work. Charles said nothing. He adores his wife. He has spent 5 decades taking the country's opinion of her on the chin, and he has never once left her out in the open. Not through the divorce, not through the funeral. And in that room, with his son standing up and his granddaughter upstairs, he sat still and let it happen. And that silence is the most significant thing that happened at Highgrove. Understand what it cost him. He was in an impossible seat, and he knew it inside 4 seconds. On one side, the woman he fought the entire country to marry, sitting there having said something indefensible about a child. On the other, his heir, his granddaughter upstairs in a dressing gown. And the plain fact that the man standing in front of him grew up watching that same institution decide it was easier to leave somebody out in the open than to defend her. Charles has spent his whole life smoothing things over. That evening he worked out that smoothing it over would put him on the wrong side of history in his own sitting room. So he stayed quiet, and every person in that room understood what it meant. "I have tried to keep this civil," William said, "because that is what everybody expects from us. I have let a lot go that did not sit right. This one involves Charlotte, and nobody undermines her confidence. I do not care who they are." Camilla put her glass down and leaned forward. "You are reading too much into it. You always take these things so seriously. Children are resilient. Children remember how they are spoken to," William said, "particularly by the people who are meant to be looking after them. Nothing theatrical about it. No door slammed. Nobody raised their voice above the level you would use to ask for the salt. That is a father drawing a line in a room where nobody has drawn one in 30 years, and there is no reverse gear on it." Catherine spoke once, at the end, and kept it to one thing. "We are asking for basic respect. Charlotte has done nothing wrong. She is being herself, and that should not be a problem in this family." Camilla looked at Charles again. Nothing. After a few minutes of that, William excused himself and went upstairs. Catherine followed him. He sat down on the edge of his daughter's bed, and this time he did not ask whether anything was wrong, because he knew, and asking a child that twice in a fortnight teaches her that being wrong is a thing that keeps happening to her. He held her hand and told her she had done nothing wrong. She was polite, she was kind, and that is all he will ever ask of her. "I tried to be," he said. "You do not have to try to be perfect," he told her. "You have to be you." 11 years old, and she thought the correct answer to being told off 3 times by a queen was that she had not tried hard enough. Downstairs, Charles changed the subject. He asked about the autumn tour. He talked about the garden. He did what that man has done his whole life, which is fill an awkward silence with something pleasant. Camilla said very little for the rest of the evening, and she did not apologize. None that evening, none the next day, nothing in writing, nothing through an aide, nothing since. She also stopped defending herself, and those two things together tell you she understood what had happened. Back at Adelaide Cottage that night, with the door shut, Catherine said the thing that decided the rest of the summer. She does not have to like me. She will treat Charlotte with respect. That is not negotiable. She will, William said, because this is not continuing. And here is the thing this whole video is about. Watch how small it looks and how much it costs. Charlotte had a recital coming up at school. Lambrook, the prep school in Berkshire. Kensington Palace announced in the summer of 2022 that George, Charlotte and Louis would start there together, and William and Catherine picked it for cover. Trees, brick, iron, a long drive, and a few years of ordinary life before the machine gets hold of them. A school recital in a hall with parents on plastic chairs is about as ordinary as it gets, and for a girl who plays, it is her one afternoon of the year. The invitations went out to immediate family only. That is the document in this story, and it is barely a document, no seal on it, nobody leaked it. It is a list of names on a sheet of paper in a private secretary's office, and somebody typed it out and Camilla's name is not on it. The palace called it a scheduling conflict. Nobody in those two households believed it, and they were never meant to. A scheduling conflict is what you say when you want the other party to understand exactly what has happened without putting the reason on paper. That is how that institution has removed people from things for 400 years. Picture the afternoon it produced. A school hall in Berkshire. Parents on plastic chairs with their coats on their laps. A piano somebody moved into position that morning, and a girl in school uniform who has practiced the same piece 40 times at Adelaide Cottage. Charles was invited. The king sat on a plastic chair in a school hall in Berkshire and watched his granddaughter play. His wife was at home. And every person in both households knew why. No official had to say the reason out loud. Two households ran their diaries as usual. One name was not typed onto one list, and the message arrived intact. That is William's version of going through the roof. No shouting, no statement, no briefing to a friendly correspondent. A name left off a list for one afternoon, and a woman who spent 20 years fighting her way onto every list in the country, understanding exactly what it means. I have been asked whether that is a bit cold for a family disagreement. Access is the only currency that family has, and access is what he took away for one afternoon, at the one event that mattered to his daughter. And Camilla could not say a word about it in public, because to complain you have to explain, and explaining means repeating out loud what you said to an 11-year-old about a scone. There is no disciplinary procedure in that world, and nobody gets a written warning. There is a diary, a set of lists, and 100 small decisions every week about who is in the room, and somebody makes every one of them. For 15 years, those decisions about Charlotte's private life were made by whoever had always made them. That spring it stopped being a default and started being William, and he has not handed it back. In the press, none of this existed. That is how the whole thing works. The photographs kept coming out on schedule. Camilla at a literacy event, smiling. The Waleses at a Windsor engagement, smiling. Family unity, grace under pressure. The usual captions by the usual people, and not one line anywhere about a child being told to sit still like a proper young lady. The public got the version it always gets, which is a photograph. Inside those walls, it had gone completely. Camilla stayed at every major engagement, carried on with the diary, and kept away from Charlotte. No more remarks, no more looks where Catherine could see them, and none at all where William could. She had taken the warning, and she had not forgotten it. Because a woman of 79 who has been corrected by her stepson in front of her husband does not file it away and move on. She had been backed off, left off a list, and then read about how the family was closer than ever in a newspaper, briefed by the same people who left her off it. That brings us to Scotland, and to the 6 words I have been holding since the start. Everything up to here could have ended there. The boundary was cold, it was effective, and the family had 4 months of quiet. Then everybody went north for the summer, and it went again. There is one more person in this story who has not appeared yet. No title, not in any of the photographs, standing in a passage at Balmoral with a tea tray in her hands. Everything you are about to hear comes through her. Balmoral is the fourth gathering, and it is not like the other three. That estate has been the one place that family can breathe since Victoria bought it. No cameras at the windows, no lenses in the trees. 50,000 acres of Aberdeenshire and a rhythm that has not changed in a century, and everybody in that family still treats the summer there as fixed. Photographs of those 3 children up there came out this month, the sort that gets millions of people saying how normal they look. Catherine agreed to go with one condition, and it was short. She was not leaving Charlotte on her own with Camilla again. Not for an afternoon, not for 10 minutes. Everybody arrived over a few days. Charles was there first, arms open, because whatever else is true about that man, he is besotted with those grandchildren. Camilla came a day later with her people and her luggage. She had not spoken to Catherine directly since Highgrove. 4 months of 2 women being professionally polite in front of photographers. The first few days were fine. Long walks, the horses, dinners that ran late and got loud. Charlotte came back to herself in about 48 hours. Chatty at breakfast, out across the fields with George and Louis, and one afternoon in the kitchen helping the staff make scones, which, after what happened at Windsor, is either an accident or the darkest joke in this story. Then, on one of those afternoons, Catherine was in the drawing room with Lady Sarah Chatto and a couple of aides. William was out fishing with his father. The children were in the garden with 2 members of staff. And for the first time since they arrived, nobody was watching Charlotte. One of the household aides leaned in and said it quietly. "I believe Princess Charlotte is in the sunroom with Her Majesty." Catherine stiffened and did not move straight away. She sat there doing the arithmetic every parent in that position does. Am I about to overreact? Is this the thing where I become the difficult one? Then she excused herself and went. William came back off the water and got the message in the passage from the same aide, and the 2 of them reached the sunroom from opposite ends of the house within a minute of each other, which is the one reason there is a witness at all. The door was not quite shut. Inside, Camilla was talking, and Charlotte was not. "We do not always need to speak over others, Charlotte. It is important to listen. And then the 6 words I have been holding since the top of this video. Sometimes your mummy forgets that too. There it is. Read it twice, because that sentence has 2 halves doing different jobs. The first half is a grandmother correcting a child, and you can argue about the tone all day. The second half has nothing to do with Charlotte. It is a woman using an 11-year-old as a delivery system for something she wants to say about that child's mother in a quiet room with nobody else in it. Charlotte said nothing back. She has never repeated those 6 words to anybody. Not to her mother that afternoon, not later, and she still has not. Camilla has never denied them either, and she was given the chance about 90 seconds later. The reason you are hearing them at all is that a member of staff was standing in the passage with a tray and heard the whole thing, and that is how it went round both households by the end of the week. A child would not say it. A queen would not take it back. The only person willing to put it into words was somebody carrying tea who was not meant to be there. Catherine opened the door. Camilla looked up, surprised. "There you are," Catherine said perfectly evenly. "I was looking for you, darling." Charlotte got up and walked straight to her mother and stood against her, and any parent knows what that is. A child who has been waiting for somebody to come. "I was having a word," Camilla said. Light tone, with a bit of an edge under it. "I heard," Catherine said, "and that is when William came in from the other door. He had heard it from the passage. He had heard the 6 words with his own ears, which matters more than anything else here, because it is the one thing in 4 months that did not reach him second-hand." Camilla started to say, She was only being a child," William said, "and she does not need correcting every time she opens her mouth." Camilla folded her arms. "I have raised children. I know when a girl is growing too fast for her own good. She is growing up perfectly well," he said, "and she will do it without being made to feel like a problem. No shouting. Nobody in that house heard raised voices, and I have asked. A man in fishing clothes standing in a sunroom telling the Queen how his daughter is going to be spoken to. Then he asked her the question. He asked her which part of that was for Charlotte. And Camilla did not answer him. She did not answer that afternoon. She did not answer at dinner, and she has not answered since. She stood there with her arms folded and looked at him, long enough for everybody in the room to understand that there was no answer that did not make it worse. That is the loudest thing in this story, and it is a woman saying nothing at all, because there is an answer, and it would have cost her nothing. She could have said she was talking about listening, or that it came out wrong, or the plain true thing, which is that Catherine has irritated her for years and it came out sideways at a child. Any of those, and the afternoon ends differently. She said none of them, because saying any of them means agreeing that the second half of that sentence had a target, and the target was not the girl in the room. "I would like more kindness around her," William said. That should not be too much to ask. Nothing came back. They left. William walked out with Charlotte, and in the hallway he crouched down beside her. And this is the bit that got to me. He told her she had done nothing wrong. She nodded, and her eyes were wet, and she still would not repeat what had been said. And he told her that she never needs to be afraid of speaking up. Sit with the shape of that. He is telling his daughter to speak up. In that family. A man who spent his whole life being told that the correct response to being hurt in public is to keep your face still, crouching in a corridor in front of an 11-year-old and telling her to do the opposite of everything he was taught. That is where the piano comes back into it, and the school hall and his mother. Diana used to stand at the school gates herself, on the pavement, in the queue with the other mothers, on purpose, against advice, because she wanted her sons to come out of a door and see their mother standing there like everybody else's. The office told her more than once that it was not appropriate. She kept doing it. 29 years on, her son buys his children a set of gates in Berkshire, and when the moment comes, he puts a recital in that school hall on a list with one name off it, so his daughter can play in front of the people who make her feel safe. Same instinct. Same argument with the same institution. Smaller building. By the end of that week, the staff at Balmoral had noticed the change, and staff notice everything. Camilla sat further from the children at meals. She stopped commenting on their behavior, their clothes, their volume, any of it. She was pleasant, she was present, she did the walks and the dinners and the church on Sunday, and she left about 3 chairs between herself and those children for the rest of the fortnight. In that world that is enormous, nobody announced anything and nobody wrote anything down. A woman changed where she sits at a table, and everybody in the building understood the whole story from it. And Charles saw it every day for a fortnight, with his wife at one end of that table and his son at the other, and he said nothing, because there was nothing left to say that would not cost him one of them. He had 4 years of chances to say a word about how his wife spoke to his granddaughter and used none of them, and the man who did it in the end was the one who learned the hard way what silence in that family costs. And at the end of it, they did the photographs. Family on the steps, everybody smiling, the king in the middle, the children at the front, the picture that goes round the world captioned as a united royal family enjoying their traditional summer in Scotland. Millions of people looked at it, and a good number of them looked at Camilla and thought how well she looks and how nice it is that they all still do this together. Nobody looking at that photograph could see the 3 chairs. That is the trick of that institution. The picture is real. Everybody is standing where they were told to stand and smiling on purpose, and it is still a lie, because what happened to that family that summer does not photograph. Camilla did not lose a title that year, or a house, or anything that will ever turn up on a front page. She lost Catherine's willingness to keep the peace, which she had for 15 years and never had to earn. She lost her stepson's assumption that she was safe around his children, which you only get to lose once. And she lost the ability to say anything about how those children behave, because the moment she opens her mouth about one of them, everybody in both households remembers a sunroom in Scotland. She wanted a quiet afternoon with no child banging away on a piano in it. She got one. She has quiet afternoons for the rest of her life now. 3 chairs down at the far end of the table, and that piano lid at Windsor is still shut, and there is not one person left in that family who will ask an 11-year-old to sit still like a proper young lady in front of her father. Charlotte is 11. She will not remember the guest list or the scheduling conflict or any of the machinery that moved around her that summer, and she has no idea that a document about her step-grandmother's future sits in a folder at Windsor with her name on the second page. She will remember 3 things. Sit still, like a proper young lady. Her father crouching in a corridor in Scotland, telling her to speak up. And that the second one came after the first. Diana never got that. She got 15 years of the same vocabulary, oversensitive, difficult, too emotional, in that identical pleasant voice from people nobody in that building ever contradicted. Her son has now done it twice in 4 months, for a girl who never met her. Right, tell me what you think, because this one has divided everybody I have shown it to. Was Camilla out of line, or is this 3 ordinary remarks from a grandmother of 79 that 2 protective parents turned into a war? And if you had heard those 6 words through a door about your own child, would you have stayed as quiet as William? I read every comment, and the good ones end up in the next video. Hit like if you got this far. It decides whether stories like this reach anybody. Subscribe and turn the bell on, because there is more coming out of Scotland before they come south.